And I want to go over on module 8, that key deep core audit. In other words, we're going to be turning that raw dirt into deal ready intel. But that's not the title. Our underground syndicate title is Interrogation Protocols for Land Assets. In other words, that shadow due diligence sheet. Let me rest your posture for a moment because up until now, everything you've done has been about positioning. You identified a territory. You then made that contact, and then you also controlled that property with the paper. And then you chose exits. And now we're going to enter into that phase that separates real operators from those that maybe just got lucky one or two times. This module exists for one main reason, and that's that you never buy land that is going to fight back. Because what I've noticed is land isn't going to warn you. I also noticed it's not going to complain, and it's also not going to negotiate with you. It's instead going to quietly get rid of margins when you don't interrogate it properly. This is not paperwork. This is what I like to refer to as a survivor intelligence. Let's talk about that sheet that's going to protect your empire. I like to refer to it as that due diligence sheet. And it's also the black book of your operation because it's so much more than just oh, what did I want to say? It's going to be that black book of your operation. It is so much more, as I mentioned, than a simple form or a checklist. It is a decision engine. And everything that you collect here is going to be your risk factor. It's also going to be your pricing weapon. And it's going to become your marketing ammunition. And of course, your exit strategy compass. This sheet is going to be what's going to keep you from buying land that looks cheap, but is actually radioactive. And I don't want you to. Let me move on to the taxes, the restrictions, and the access, because this could be a deal killer. I want to talk about deciding whether the deal's a weapon or a dud. When we think of HOA, I want you to ask if the HOA exists or not. Are there fees? Are there restrictions? HOAs, I've noticed, silently seem to create a problem. The HOAs silently murder margins if you ignore them. Now, when we talk about taxes, you want to make sure it's simple and it's logged. Let's not get emotional on this because zoning and restrictions, you simply want to confirm. And I want to read this because I don't want you to miss any of them. And I'm also going to ask Tessa to bullet point these on the screen because you want to confirm what's the minimum acreage, the buildable areas, the non-buildable zones, the lot splits, the use cases, anything that caps value. But when it comes to road access, I want to read this as well because access kills deals faster than anything else. So you want to classify if it's paved, gravel, dirt, paper road. Is it an easement only? Is it landlocked? If access is unclear, then everything stops. Let me move on to that market value because you do want to have that confirmed, and I want you to have this surgical mode about you. In your earlier research, look, guys, the more you research, the closer you're going to be. So another way to reword that is your earlier research got you close. And now this phase is going to lock the precision. So what I want you to determine, the final sale price, the exit strategy, that risk profile, and the margin reality. This is not broad comping. This is surgical. You want to find out what's the closest parcels. What are the most recent sales? What is the true range? You pick the pin, not the ballpark. Let me also talk about the topography and those terrain hazards. Land, I've noticed sometimes can lie in photos, but the topography does not. So you want to assess, is it flat, rolling, sloped, steep, mountain face, or maybe a literal cliff? Those are the subdivision lots. That's easy. You also want to find out, is it in Appalachia? Is it in Colorado? Are there western states? Because what I've noticed is one bad topography, and then your lot is a wall. So you want to zoom in before you begin dreaming. Let me move on to the environmental and the habit issues. They are rare, but it could be fatal. It is usually irrelevant, but when they do appear, they do matter. So the environmental issues that are near might be, you want to find out if they're near a gas station, a dry cleaner, or some kind of an industrial site. Because the habitat restrictions may restrict plants, animals, or some kind of migration zone. Sometimes the permits will solve it, sometimes the time will solve it. And sometimes it's best just walk away from these. And knowing which one is power. Let me move on to what I like to call the reality check, meaning de-escalation. I want to pause here because I do not want you to overwhelm yourself. Most properties are not going to trigger these issues, but the ones that do, I've noticed that those sellers respond fastest because complexity creates motivation. And this sheet exists so that you spot traps before you step on them. I now want to move on to turning intel into a marketing ammo for you because this is where 99% of investors seem to fail. Realize this, that you now know more about this land than the seller and competing investors, probably even more so than most buyers. So while the others are saying, hey, let me check with the county, you're going to say, no, because the utilities are confirmed. The access is already verified. The zoning is already clarified and the restrictions are disclosed. So this is why your properties are going to sell faster. And this is why you are going to control the price. And this is why buyers are going to trust you instantly because information is dominance. Speaking of time worth investing, let's also go into the due diligence. It's a better word instead of spending, because this is going to dictate the exit. Your findings are going to decide a path because there are too many unknowns. Whether we can double close, there's thin margin on whether we want to assign something. We want to make sure that it's clean, strong, and it's an obvious deal, and you can buy outright. You want to stay away from any kind of emotion. What I want you to do is scale and do so safely. So the closing thing that you want to have is that you understand the difference between something that's quick or an elite surgical due diligence. I now would like to move on to that next phase because taking all of that intelligence and weaponizing that into a marketing engine that's going to convert into attention, into money, this is where the signals are going to turn into liquidity. And that's where we're going to go next.